I'll speak for the motion that major reductions in carbon emissions are not worth the money. Perhaps a natural reaction to that would be, what? Are there still people who think it's more important to save money than to save the world? That's not our point. Our point is that we should really save the world and not just feel like we're saving it. Let's be clear. Global warming is real, man-made, and increases by carbon emissions. And global warming will harm future generations, especially the world's poor. But the brutal fact is that even major carbon cuts at dramatic cost will make little impact on temperature and do virtually nothing to help the world. Still, my honored opponents will spend hundreds or even thousands of billions of dollars to slightly reduce the impact of climate change 100 years from now. Yet, more than half the world's population suffers from medieval problems that we could fix right now at much lower cost. This is nothing less than a moral tragedy for the developed world. Knowingly squandering colossal sums of money, achieving almost nothing, while fractional sums could save millions of lives right now. Obvious as it may sound, our goal isn't for those of us in wealthy Western world to feel good about ourselves. Presumably, it's about making sure we do the most good. Today, 1 billion people lack clean drinking water. 2 billion people lack sanitation. 3 billion people lack simple micronutrients, preventing physical and mental development. 1/4 of all the world's deaths are due to easily curable infectious diseases, the equivalent of the population of Florida wiped off the map each year. As an example, 1 million people die from malaria each year, and up to 2 billion people get the debilitating disease. Yet, my esteemed opponents will focus on how global warming will cause a slight increase in malaria occurrence 100 years from now, and suggest that we should fix that through inefficient carbon cuts. But we could eradicate malaria right now if we wanted, and at a lot lower cost. That is the moral choice. This pattern of little good at high cost we find repeated in the cases my opponents will present to you. And this is why all peer-reviewed economic analyses show that simply cutting carbon is a poor way to help the world. And that's exactly the crux of tonight's debate. That the best available economic evidence tells us that by focusing on cutting carbon emissions, we're committing to an exceptionally inefficient way to tackle the symptoms of global warming, let alone global warming itself. And given how much of our resources will be squandered in the process, the consequences are nothing less than a moral tragedy. Of course, my esteemed opponents will claim that without major carbon cuts, the world will be beyond saving. Oliver Tickell has written that unabated global warming by the end of the century will be a catastrophe and the beginning of the extinction of the human race, because all the ice will melt and we'll see 200 feet of sea level rise in the long term, wiping out pretty much everyone we hold dear, killing billions of people. This doom-mongering is simply wrong. It's inconsistent with everything we know, and it's important that people everywhere start to realize this. We've entrusted the UN Climate Panel, the so-called IPCC, with its thousands of scientists to outline the most likely climate consequences. They do not support Tickell or any of the other more alarmist writings of recent times. What the IPCC does tell us is, yes, sea levels will rise, somewhere between 6 and 24 inches over the coming century. Such a rise is entirely manageable and not dissimilar to the about 12 inches we barely noticed risen over the last 150 years. Dramatic, expensive carbon cuts would make sea level rise just a few inches less in 100 years. Is this really the best we can do to help the world? Of course, the obvious and easy thing is to say, well, we should do all good things. We should both make major carbon reductions and combat malaria. But this simply ignores the fact that we aren't doing either very well. We avoid the hard truth that the rich world's focus is shifting daily towards global warming, with proportional less support seen for other real and more tractable problems. It's simply untruthful to claim that the focus on climate change doesn't mean there's less money going elsewhere. The Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria is telling us that billions of dollars are being redirected to the fight global warming at the expense of the biggest killers of the poor countries. Any company or organization today that wants to appear responsible, or even just cool, will not be spending their cash in fighting tuberculosis, but wants to go carbon neutral. We must save the world, yes, and here's how. At the Copenhagen Consensus Project last year, a panel of the world's most distinguished economists looked at a wealth of research of all the major problems in the world and the possible solutions to them. And they showed us where we can do the most good. They agreed that global warming is real, and they were unanimous that the best way to tackle it is by investing much more in research and development in low-carbon energy technologies. The economists also found that carbon emission cuts, tonight's motion, would be the poorest use of our money. They confirmed that we can do so much more good elsewhere, that we need to ease our preoccupation with cutting carbon and focusing much more on fixing the real problems of the here and now. This is about saving everyone's world, not through ineffective and hugely costly carbon cuts, but through effective research and development on low-carbon energy sources that, anyway, will be the only long-term solution to the CO2 problem. And then remembering the major problems and challenges of this world. Every single year, and right now, a devastation is taking place in our world. A dumb, readily avoidable devastation. Continuing mindlessly and spending hundreds of billions of dollars in carbon cuts is simply disgraceful when it takes so little to do something about this devastation. So this is our chance not just to feel good about helping the planet, but actually to do the right thing, the rational thing, and the morally correct thing. I commend this motion to you. Do what's rational, not what's just fashionable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bjorn Lomborg.